Okay, looks good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Chaitanyam Sarvagam Sarvam Sarvabhuta Guhashayam Yat Sarva Vishayatitam Tasmai Sarvavide Namaha. Good. Welcome back. Welcome also to the many students attending these classes online. We continue. In fact, we're finishing, I think, today, the chapter 16 of our Upadesha Sahasri. There are 19 chapters, so we're coming near the end of the text. Although I have to warn you that chapter 18 is really long. 17, not so much. 18 will take a while, but it's the most important chapter of the entire text, so it'll be worth our study. But before we get there, we have to finish 16 and 17. 17 will begin next week. Here at the end of the chapter, a very conventional style of writing is to conclude whatever is the topic of the chapter. You conclude with some discussion about the benefits of those teachings. So what's called the phala. Some of you know that when you chant a stotra, there's a phala shruti. There's a short verse or verses talking about the benefits of chanting that stotra. So in a similar style, we see the final verses of this chapter talking about the consequences of understanding and immediately realizing what has been taught. The direct personal realization of whatever has been taught in this chapter, the consequences of that here are taught at the end. And also I'll mention before we get into the verses that the meter goes to a longer meter now, a 12-syllable meter, so we chant it in a little different way. You can, as always, as I'm chanting, please read the translation and then repeat after me. Everything is good here? Looks good. Okay. Swasakshikam jnanamativa nirmalam Swasakshikam jnanamativa nirmalam Vikalpanabhyo viparitam Vikalpanabhyo viparitam Avapya samyag yari nishchito bhaven Avapya samyag yari nishchito bhaven Niranvayo nirvritameti shashvatam Niranvayo nirvritameti shashvatam. The verb is way down, avapya, in the beginning of the third line. Avapya, having gained, having discovered, having, again, the direct realization. We've said so many times, intellectual or conceptual understanding of this material is virtually useless. So this is talking, avapya literally means having obtained, and it means having directly realized. Having directly realized what? Go up to the top. Swasakshikam jnanam. Jnanam here means consciousness, means knowledge in other contexts. Here, consciousness. Consciousness being your essential nature, consciousness being you, the one who knows what's happening right now. That consciousness here is called by Shankara swasakshikam. Wonderful term. Generally, things have to be known through being observed or witnessed. Sakshi is the witness. But here, this consciousness is swasakshikam. It is known on its own without being witnessed. It's known without being witnessed because it's you, the witness, the witnesser, if that's a word. So it doesn't need to be known by another because it's you. In Sanskrit, we say swata siddha, self-established, self-revealing, swaprakasha, self-revealing. That's a nice term as well. So that consciousness, I've joked with you before, you don't need all this Vedanta to know that you are a conscious being. No one needs to tell you that you are a conscious being. The nature of that consciousness is something else. That's what these teachings help you discover. So that consciousness is ativa nirmalam, extremely pure. And in context, extremely pure means utterly unaffected by the problems of your body, problems of your mind, problems of your boss, your spouse, your children, whatever it is in your life. Consciousness is utterly unaffected. Your mind can be affected, your body can be affected. Consciousness, which is your essential nature, is ativa nirmalam, utterly unaffected. And we connect that to our earlier discussions about unchanging consciousness. We need to understand that's really the basis for this whole teaching about the nature of Atma. If Atma undergoes change, it's definitely going to be affected by what's happening in your mind. Atma is the unchanging consciousness that reveals the changing activities of your mind. As we've talked about that before. Finally, actually two more adjectives. That consciousness is also vikalpanabhyaha viparitam. It is other than vikalpana. Vikalpana, just in general, thoughts, mental activities, vrittis. So consciousness is not a vritti. It's not an experience. This is where so many people get off on the wrong foot, so to speak. How to experience consciousness. Already present in your experience. Not as a discrete thing that's available for experience, but rather as you, the conscious witness, because of everything is known. In the context of meditation, we've discussed this several times, is that anything that arises in your deep meditation is not Atma, consciousness, the true self. The Atma will arise like 1,000 blinding suns. How many books say something like that? Anything you observe in consciousness, by definition, anything you observe in meditation, by definition, is not you, the conscious observer. It's a thing, a mental thing, a vikalpa. So, consciousness is viparitam, other than vikalpana, all these mental activities. And finally, this consciousness is advayam. And to simply call it non-dual, in one word, Shankara connects this discussion to a far greater discussion. So far we're discussing what could be called jivatma, your individual consciousness. But as soon as Shankara says advayam, it can no longer be your consciousness or my consciousness. It is the one so-called universal consciousness. I think Ramakrishna Mission teachers like that term, universal, and it's a good term. Universal consciousness. In Sanskrit, we would say sarva vyapaka, all-pervasive consciousness. One all-pervasive consciousness manifest in the minds of every being. So, avapya, having discovered that consciousness, having directly realized This is a funny word. I don't know where it came from. I think in the 60s or 70s, they say, "Do you grok it, man?" Grok? Have you ever heard that expression? It means some kind of direct apperception, some direct realization. Funny word used as slang. So here, clearly, we're not talking about some conceptual understanding. All right, then. Yeah.
I took it out.
We still hear it?
Yeah, it is the hearing aid.
Yes. Would you like to use our
Yeah,
assistive listening? Next time you come, you use our assisted listening. In the meanwhile, this is distracting to many others here, so maybe it can be adjusted or turned off.
Let me get, if you can turn it off.
I'm out now. That's okay.
No, no, it's still making noise.
Still making noise?
Yes.
Yes. There you go. Good.
I can you still hear it?
Yeah.
N- Not now. Now it's good.
Okay.
Good. Very good. Thank you. Next time, make sure you use our assistive listening. Good. Okay. So avapya, if you say, how do you make this discovery? That's what these teachings are all about. These teachings, as you've heard me say many times, is not a collection of spiritual nuggets of wisdom, but rather is a detailed and sophisticated methodology to lead you step by step by step by step to recognize this truth. So what you're seeking is already present, but it's not properly understood or recognized. So this teaching leads you to make that recognition step by step, that methodology, and that process you might know we generally call Shravana. We're going to talk briefly about Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, which are the three primary practices in Advaita Vedanta. So Shravana literally means hearing or listening, but you know very well it means using, I shouldn't say that. What we've defined again and again, a very important definition, Shravana is not, in this context, you can't describe Shravana as hearing, because to use the American joke, things go in one ear and out the other, that's hearing, and that's what most people do. Or based on we had a nice discussion in our meditation session yesterday about what goes in here gets stuck because of your preconceived notions, which prevent what you hear from being, it like bounces back out, doesn't even go out the other ear. It comes in and then gets rejected. So due to preconceived notions. So Shravana can't be called hearing for these reasons, but rather the definition that to me makes more sense. Shravana is a process of self-inquiry, atma-vichara. And then you say, what is the relationship between Shravana, listening, and atma-vichara, a process of self-inquiry? Atma-vichara needs to be guided. That's where Shravana comes in. Atma-vichara, guided, self-inquiry, guided by these teachings. So the Shravana part means guided by these teachings, otherwise atma-vichara will not be fruitful. So a process of self-inquiry, guided by these teachings that come from the scripture, and you'll probably need the help of a teacher to really be successful in that process. That is Shravana. So avapya samyak, having ascertained that properly, but that's not enough. Shankara himself says, yadi, if, and I think in math they have this operation, if and only if. If and only if nishchitaha bhavet, if these teachings have been nishchitaha, completely ascertained made firm, made clear, and here a negative definition is helpful. What does it require? What is, when you, let's make it very clear. The initial recognition of your true nature does not immediately lead to a complete transformation of how you think and feel and function in this world. So many people think you make this discovery and it's over. You're completely transformed in a blinding flash. This is really simplistic, and it's wrong. It's wrong because our minds are so complicated that even when you remove the so-called veil of ignorance that covers Atma, that prevents you from discovering your true nature, the true nature of that consciousness, even when that ignorance is removed, our minds and brains are so deeply programmed, so habitual in nature, there are many obstacles that remain. You have knowledge, but that knowledge comes with obstacles. So we talk about gaining atma-jnanam, self-knowledge. The end point of Shravana is atma-jnanam. But that atma-jnanam comes with all this baggage from our minds, these obstacles. In Sanskrit, the word obstacle is pratibandha. So if you like technical terms, the result of Shravana is sa-pratibandhika jnanam. Sa-pratibandhika jnanam means knowledge accompanied by obstacles. And it turns out that some of these obstacles can make your realization almost useless. These obstacles must be removed. So, the outcome of Shravana is sapratibandhika jnanam. It is atma-jnanam. You've discovered your true self, but there are many obstacles. What are those obstacles? Some of the obstacles are pretty obvious. Doubt and vagueness. Those would be very common obstacles. And those obstacles of doubt, how do I know this is true? Or is that really true? Or there's this teaching, that teaching. There's lots of, because of the breadth of these teachings, there's many opportunities for having question and vagueness. When you first get it, it may not have the clarity, vividness, if I can use that word, that's required. And it takes time to remove these doubts and to gain that clarity. Years ago, it was, you remember these cameras that had the self-developing film? You go click and then zzzt, and that film pops out of it. And when you first look at that image, it's just white, right? So that's a little bit like the result of Shravana. When the result is sapratibandhika jnanam, the image is present, but you can't see anything. So that's what it means. The outcome of Shravana is knowledge that is obstructed by so many problems that the benefit, the result, the phala, is nearly absent. Of course, you know that when you watch that white picture for a couple of minutes, slowly the image gets developed and appears on that. And that's perhaps a legitimate metaphor to describe how these teachings work. After Shravana, you continue your studies. That's manana, this process of reconsidering the teachings you already know, reflecting on these teachings, chewing it over, so to speak, until that clarity comes and the doubts are removed. And that can take a long time. Those pictures, I think, took several minutes in order to be developed. I wish it only took several minutes for these Vedantic teachings to become clear, but it's not several minutes, perhaps not even several months. I think for most people, it's more like several years, at least it was for me. So this process of removing doubts and gaining clarity is a result of continued study. You've already made the discovery, but continued reflection on these teachings. Having made the discovery in Shravana, the processes of manana is keep going. Keep going in your studies, but now the emphasis has shifted from making the initial discovery. The emphasis is now shifted to removing doubts and gaining clarity. Then there's one more category of obstacle. That category of obstacle, I think we've discussed in this class before. Yeah, we did. There was a whole chapter devoted to nididhyasana. Might be chapter 10, I'm not sure if I remember correctly. Most of you were here for that discussion, and we discussed at great length the problem of nididhyasana. The problem of viparita bhavana. Sorry, nididhyasana is the solution, it's not the problem. The problem is habitual thinking. You have been identified with your physical body for how long? How old were you when you called yourself a boy or a girl? Right? That's identification with your consciousness is neither male nor female, but we get identified with our bodies at such an early age, and that identification just grows and develops over our lifetimes. That identification, both with the body and the mind, is so deeply ingrained, it would be ridiculous to imagine it's just going to disappear overnight. Through Shravana, you gain that recognition. Do you think decades of mental conditioning are instantly going to be wiped out? Impossible. So we have a practice specifically intended for removing that habitual wrong thinking, that habitual identification with body and mind. We call that problem viparita bhavana, a feeling which is viparita, which is opposed or contrary to the truth of who you are, and it is removed through a process called nididhyasana, which we can translate as Vedantic contemplation. And I think, that's not our topic, so I don't want to get into it. I think it's chapter 10. If you're not sure, look at the list on our website. It'll all be, it's identified there someplace. Okay, so Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. Notice he says yadi, if. So avapya, having discovered your true self, you gain what? You become, last line, niranvayaha, you become free from ignorance. Here it means free from ignorance. And you become nirvrittim, not ni. And many people who read Sanskrit, you can't lose that one letter. Huge difference between ni and nir, because many times opposite meanings. Here it's nirvritti, which is fulfillment, contentment, completion is the meaning of that word nirvritti. So nirvrittam eti, one gains completion, fulfillment, being niranvaya, being freed from ignorance. And what kind of completeness? Well, let's just leave it there in one more word. But you gain that completeness, Shankara says, yadi, if. And again, if and only if you have done the manana and nididhyasana. Completion. So Shravana does not necessarily lead you to a state of completion, fulfillment, but rather through continued manana and nididhyasana, you gain nirvrittam eti. One reaches that state of completion, which is shashvatim, in eternal, unending, uninterrupted. An important point before we move on is this. Do you gain this nirvritti, this contentment, this completion, do you gain it after you die, or do you gain it immediately? And it's a trick question. Because the answer is yes. You gain that contentment and completion immediately. When your manana and nididhyasana is sufficient to remove all those obstacles, you are enlightened, you have reached the end of your spiritual travels, you have gained that enlightenment. So immediately, and then after you die, the question is, do you get reborn and have to start over again? Remember those board games where you and you shoots all these different board games. You get stuck and you have to start over again. So if you get reborn, you're going to be reborn ignorant. So it's like go back to start or whatever it is, and you have to start over again. So both the freedom from suffering you experience immediately is called jivan mukti, enlightenment while you're alive. And because of the absence of rebirth, the freedom from suffering you enjoy after this life comes to an end is called videha mukti, without a body. Okay. Then. Idam rahasyam paramam parayanam. Idam rahasyam paramam parayanam. Vyapeta doshar abhimanadvarjitaihi. Vyapeta doshar abhimanadvarjitaihi. Samiksha karya matyarajave sada. Samiksha karya matirarjave sada na tattvadrik swanyamatirhi kaschana na tattvadrik swanyamatirhi. It's not swanyam, but swanya matihi. We have to know the words properly. Okay, we'll get there in a minute. Once again, start in the third line where our verb is hiding, samiksha. Having discovered, literally having seen, but we know that this isn't something you see with your eyes. So having seen, having understood, having discovered what? Go back up to the top. Idam rahasyam. This secret. And we've joked about this word secret before. It is so secret that if it's right in front of your eyes, you won't get it. That's how secret it is. What do they say? Hiding in plain view. That kind of secret. So idam rahasyam, this secret, paramam we'll break it differently. Idam rahasyam, which is the paramam parayanam goal. The paramam parayanam, the ultimate goal of life. And as we've said many times, the ultimate goal of life is freedom from suffering. And who is it that makes this discovery? Vyapeta doshaihi, one who is freed from impediments. Dosha means defect, but here an impediment. Vyapeta doshaihi, one who's freed from impediments, freed from impurities. That's okay. And abhimana varjitaihi, one who's freed from identification. Now, are these prerequisites or is it the result? That is, are these, you only make this discovery when you are vyapeta dosha, when you're free from impediments, and when you're abhimana varjita, without identification. Is that a prerequisite or is that a result of enlightenment? Again, it's a trick question. Both. That is, you have to be sufficiently free from impediments and identification as a prerequisite. You have to be sufficiently free, not completely free. You have to be an adhikari, a prepared, qualified student. But then after gaining enlightenment, you become perfectly free from impediments. Manana nididhyasana. What are they for? Removing these impediments. And abhimana varjita, you become completely free from identification with your body and mind. So that sounds like we're talking about Shravana Manana Nididhyasana again, and that is exactly what Shankara is doing. He says, Samiksha, having discovered this paramam parayanam, this ultimate goal, having made this discovery that your true nature is sat-chit-ananda atma, then what? Sada, third line end. Sada, continually, karya, there is something that needs to be done. What is that? That your matihi, that your mind should be focused in arjave. Arjava, literally arjava means that which is straight. Here it means truth. You know, it's the straight truth. I don't know if that means anything, but the idea is truth. The commentator says, Arjava means Brahmatma Tattva, the reality of yourself being identical to Brahman. This is how the commentator explains it. So your mind should always be fixed in the truth of who you are. Sounds like it's a reference to Manana Nididhyasana. So Samikshya, the initial discovery taking place due to Shravana, followed by making your mind focused on the truth of who you are afterwards. Definitely referring to manana and nididhyasana. This is the practice. And it is indeed a practice. If somebody were to ask what is the main practice of Advaita Vedanta, you can give a one-word answer, which is atma-vichara. In Sanskrit, that's one word. Atma-vichara, self-inquiry, is the main practice. And then if you want to give a more detailed explanation of what is the practice of Vedanta, then it's Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Again, Shravana meaning self-inquiry guided by these teachings. Shravana. Manana, removing doubt and vagueness. Nididhyasana, removing that habitual identification with the body and mind. And Shankara concludes here saying just kind of nice style. He says, Nakaschana tattvadrik. Nakaschana, none who is a tattvadrik, a knower of reality, no one who is enlightened, swa anya matihi, he, indeed, no one who is enlightened has swa anya matihi. Mati here means a conclusion that swa, oneself, is anya, different or separate from Brahman. No one who is enlightened sees himself or herself as being a separate individual being. Anyone who's enlightened sees, at every level, this body is part of the physical cosmos, the physical universe. Ishvara as Virat Purusha. This body is part of Ishvara. I've used some loose terms here. The vision of an enlightened person is one of non-separation at every level, including the level of body and mind. This body is non-separate from Ishvara's body in quotation marks. This mind is non-separate from Ishvara's mind. This prana is non-separate from Ishvara's prana. And finally, this consciousness is non-separate from Ishvara's consciousness, that one consciousness. So this sense of non-separation at all levels, at a worldly level, body and mind, and also at the ultimate level, consciousness. All right. Then. Aneka janmantara sanchitar naro, aneka janmantara sanchitar naro, vimuchyate jnana nimitta patakaihi, vimuchyate jnana nimitta patakaihi, idam viditva paramam hi pavanam, idam viditva paramam hi pavanam, nalipyate vyoma iveha karma bihi, nalipyate vyoma iveha karma bihi. And the first line, naraha, a person. A person, second line, vimuchyate, becomes freed, becomes liberated. Significant that the goal of Vedanta is described in a negative term. Moksha, freedom, liberation. Freedom from what? Liberation from what? And it's significant that a negative term is used because, as we've discussed before, you already are that. Tat tvam asi, as we've seen before, is in the present tense. You already are that. You don't become that. You already are that which you want to be. Or in simple language, your true nature is already divine, always has been, always will be. Then what's the problem? That's what Vedanta deals with. The problem is the presence of ignorance and confusion. Confusion meaning wrong conclusions. Identification with your body and mind is a wrong conclusion. And this wrong conclusion is due to ignorance of your true nature. So enlightenment then, really and truly, it's not what you get. It's what you get rid of. Therefore, called moksha. Here, vimuchyate, one becomes freed. Naraha vimuchyate, one becomes freed, not just from worldly suffering in this life, but future lives as well, which means you don't get reborn. How do you avoid being reborn? You become freed from aneka janmantra sanchitaihi. The karmas, which are sanchitta, which are accumulated or gained in janmantra, in other births. How many other births? Aneka. Infinite number of prior births. In an infinite number of prior births, you have accumulated an infinite amount of karma. How can you possibly get rid of an infinite amount of karma? Not a little bit at a time. The only way to get rid of that infinite amount of karma is to give up ownership of that karma, which means the doer, the agent who committed that karma, has to go, has to die. And who is the one who did the karma? Whoever said, I did it. There's a cartoon I remember reading when I was a child. And there's a child standing next to the broken lamp. And mom is standing there. And the boy, of course, says, I didn't do it. Right. So anyway, we get the point. Whoever did the actions reaps the consequences of those actions. who did the actions? Did your body do the actions? Not on its own. Did your mind do the actions? Not on its own. Did consciousness do the actions? Consciousness doesn't do anything. Then who did the actions? That's that ego. Sense of individuality. The individual person which lives inside your head, so to speak. That jiva. That jiva, that individual person which is a product of ignorance. When you take one body plus one mind plus one consciousness, it is a bad joke, put them in a mixie, right? Mix them up all very thoroughly, and mixing is significant confusion. Our failure to discern the difference between where the body and mind ends and where consciousness begins. In this confusion, what arises is an individual person who says, me, I did it. That one gets destroyed through these teachings. That ego, that ahankara, not actually destroyed, but we remove the reality. We negate. There's a fancy logical word. We negate the reality of that ahankara. Therefore, the ownership of all the karma goes away. There's no rebirth. And all that karma is described here as, in the second line, ajnana nimitta patakaihi. Pataka means sin. Here, karma in general, not just papa karmas, but by the way, you get reborn not just because of your papa karmas. If you spend your whole lifetime doing rituals and you get lots of punya karmas, you get reborn because of those punya karmas as well. Any karmas. The result has to be fructified, so it's not only papa karmas that cause rebirth, punya karmas also cause rebirth. So ajnana nimitta patakaihi, the result of all those karmas which are ajnana nimitta, which are the result of ignorance, which I just said. Failure to discern that your true nature as consciousness doesn't do anything. Things get done when the body and mind are in the presence of consciousness and one more element is present. Let me just see if you can figure it out. If you have consciousness, you have a body and mind in the presence of consciousness, there's one more element required for actions to take place. What is that element? Ahankara, ego, sense of individuality. That's when actions take place. Then, idam viditva, having recognized, having realized, idam paramam pavanam, having recognized this truth which is he, indeed, paramam pavanam, the most purifying. The most purifying, many people, many very pious Hindus are focused on what's called prayaschitta karmas. They want to, I think it's translated as expiatory rituals which are meant to remove your bad karmas. And here's the problem. If you have an infinite number of prior lives, in an infinite number of prior lives, you've accumulated an infinite amount of papa karma. Tell me, how much prayaschitta should you do? So it's a common kind of prayaschitta. Go to India, take bath in Ganga. Everyone's Ganga Snan. This is a solution to all your problems, is Ganga Snan. Well, that Gangas, how many Ganga Snans, bath, should you do to get rid of an infinite number of papa karmas? Now, some people believe that the holiness of the Ganga is so much that it can actually, some people believe that a single bath in the Ganga can remove an infinite number of papa karmas. maybe, there are some scriptures that put it that way, so suppose we accept that. Even then it's limited, because as soon as you get out of the Ganga, what do? You go back you go back to your old ways, and you start piling up more papakarmas. So bathing in the Ganga doesn't do anything about those karmas. So what is paramam pavanam? Paramam pavanam, what is most purifying, is what will remove not only your past sins, but your future sins? What in the world could remove future sins? We just discussed it. When you are no longer an agent of action, when that agent of action has been destroyed, so to speak, in the fire of knowledge, when you are no longer an individual being, when you are enlightened, your actions, the actions performed by your body and mind, will reap no new karma, what's called agami karma. In fact, the actions of your body and mind will be the results of your prarabdha karmas. Your body and mind will continue acting according to your prarabdha karmas, but no more willful action. Willful action is what causes karma. In the absence of willful action, that karma is not committed. And this is a big, I don't think we want to get in. It's a topic that you can actually spend several classes on, and I don't think it's worth it for us at this point to get into that. The question, this goes on in scholarly commentaries. They want to analyze what impels the behavior of an enlightened person. So either we can study those complicated commentaries, or the easy way, I think, wait until you're enlightened and find out for yourself. That's the easy way. So, well, this is my excuse not to get into all that discussion. Okay, in this way, that person nalipyate, having gained this paramam pavanam, this supreme purification, not just from past sins, but even from future sins, this person nalipyate will no longer be affected by any kind of nalipyate karma bihi, and the last word, will no longer be affected by any kinds of karma. Vyoma iha, here in the world, just like vyoma, space, is not affected by anything whatsoever. In the same way, the consciousness is not affected in any way. And the enlightened person, na lipyate karma bihi, is no longer affected by karma. Leading us to the concluding verse of chapter 16. Prashanta chittaya jitendriyaya cha, prashanta chittaya jitendriyaya cha, prahina doshaya yatokta karine, prahina doshaya yatokta karine, gunan vitaya nugataya sarvada, gunan vitaya nugataya sarvada, pradeyame tat satatam mukshave, pradeyame tat satatam mukshave. Start at the end. Etat, this teaching, whatever has been taught in this chapter, this teaching, pradeyam, should be given. Should be given to whom? Mumukshave. To a mumukshu, to someone who is desirous of getting enlightenment. When should it be given to a mumukshu? Satatam, always, continually, which is why our classes go on and on. All right. So pradeya mumukshave, this teaching should always be given, continually be given to mumukshu. What kind of mumukshu? And here Shankara gives a pretty elaborate description. He says you should give it to a mumukshu who is prashanta chitta, whose mind is calm. A mumukshu who is jitendriya, whose senses are under control. A mumukshu who is prahina dosha, whose defects or impediments have been removed. A mumukshu who is yatokta karen, who does what he or she is supposed to do. Yatokta, nice expression. Who does the right thing. Righteous. A mumukshu who is guna anvita, endowed with good qualities. A mumukshu who is anugata, who is obedient. Now, who among us, myself included, can say we meet all these qualifications? Is your prashanta chitta, is your mind always calm? Jitendriya, are your senses always controlled? Prahina dosha, are every last one of your defects removed? Yatokta karen, do you always do the right thing? Guna anvita, are you endowed with all good qualities or just some of them? And anugata, are you always obedient? And of course, no normal human being is perfect. We do the best we can. So then what is Shankara's point here? Is he's saying that these teachings should only be given to that perfect mumukshu. We use the term uttama adhikari. The adhikari, the qualified student who is uttama, of the highest caliber. Well, if classes were only given to uttama adhikaris, every guru who ever existed would have no students. Because who can claim to be an uttama adhikari? So these teachings are not made for an uttama adhikari anyway. In fact, the teachings intended for an uttama adhikari can be expressed in 3 words. Tat, tvam, asi. Theoretically, if you are an uttama adhikari, all you need is to hear tat, tvam, asi, and that's it. You don't even need to do manana nididhyasana because your mind is so perfected. Shravana is enough. There are no obstacles, no impediments to be removed. But of course, notice that these teachings are much more elaborate than Tattvamasi. In fact, they're going on for hundreds and hundreds. What did we say? 800 some verses, I think. It's called Sahasra, 1,000, but I think 800 something verses. Why so many verses? And the reason now is clear, because the students are not uttama adhikaris. So this is not a prohibition. It's just a recognition of the fact that we all need these qualifications to an adequate extent. We need to be adequately qualified. You don't need to be supremely qualified. You need to be adequately qualified, and that's what Shankara describes in this verse. And it's not a prohibition anyway. When you come to suppose there were an entrance exam I understand in India you get some really tough entrance exams. Even in this country, I don't know, did you have to take this GMAT or something? GRE. All right? Did you have to take that? Was it hard? Not too hard. You study a lot. Okay. So there are entrance examinations. So if you take an entrance examination to get into grad school, it has to be, at a certain level. How about an entrance exam to study Advaita Vedanta? Who could pass that? Honestly, I mean, with this kind of qualifications required, no one could pass such a entrance exam. What guru would administer? But they did have. In ancient times, I don't think in modern times, in ancient times there was a quasi-entrance exam, not really an entrance exam. What was that? They would test in various ways, they would test the commitment of a student. No exam, but it would be, the typical thing would be, go away, come back after a few years. If you still want this, I'll teach you. That kind of thing. Many stories in many different ways. Show up at the ashram, gives you a broom, and you spend the next 12 years sweeping the floors before you attend any classes. There are a variety of stories like this, which are the equivalent of an entrance exam. But notice what they're testing. They're testing the mumukshutva, the commitment to gaining spiritual enlightenment. That's what's commitment is being tested, nothing else. So that's the ultimate requirement. And that's why Shankara ends with that, with those words. Pradeyam mumukshave. These teachings should be given satatam, continually, to anyone who is truly a mumukshu, who is truly desirous of gaining moksha, enlightenment. So, nice way, Shankara concludes this chapter. When we meet next time, we will begin chapter 17. I'll introduce it properly at that time. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritangamaya. Om shanti shanti shanti. Om tat sat.